You're listening to Mr. Open Banking, the only podcast dedicated to exploring the open banking movement. Whether you're a financial expert, banking executive, or everyday consumer, open banking affects everyone and will change the way we interact with our money. I'm Eyal and Jess, your host. This episode is brought to you by F-Data, the Financial Data and Technology Association, advocating for open finance across North America and around the world. The world of money is changing in amazing ways every single day. But one part of that world that has remained constant, ever present, for over 70 years is the credit card. The big brands are so ubiquitous, so well known all around the world that I don't even have to name them. Sure, they have changed form over more recent decades, replacing stripes with chips and plastic hardware with embedded software, but those same cards and the networks that power them continue to play a crucial role in our financial lives. Now, when most people think of the card networks, they think of payments, the simple act of buying something. But that view, while not wrong, is far too narrow. Because behind every payment is something much bigger. An intricate web of trust, security, identity, experience, and, of course, data. Cast in that light, the card networks are about so much more than just payments. The truth is, these cards were never just about buying stuff, or even buying stuff on credit. That was just the visible surface of something much larger. A deeper shift in how financial data is shared throughout the economy. As money becomes digital, the larger role these networks play as data brokers and data custodians becomes more and more obvious. But it was always there, enabling banks, merchants, customers, and everyone in between to trade together, work together, and trust each other. A tradition they will have to continue as they build the financial networks of tomorrow. On this episode, recorded live at Money 2020 in Las Vegas, I speak to someone who has been leading one of the major card networks towards that very goal, helping shape their approach to data sharing from the inside. On Mr. Open Banking Live. You're listening to Mr. Open Banking, the only podcast dedicated to exploring the evolution of open banking around the world. I'm your host, Eyal and Jess, broadcasting live from Las Vegas as part of the Money Pot exhibit at the world's premier fintech event, Money 2020. For this session, I'm joined by someone who has been a vocal advocate of open banking since its earliest days. All the more impressive because she has done so while leading the global open finance strategy for one of the most well-known financial brands in the world. Since joining the firm almost 2 decades ago, she has established herself as a key architect of the company's transformation into a global open data platform, overseeing the development of new products and technologies designed to unlock a more secure and inclusive financial data ecosystem worldwide. Jess Turner is the EVP and Global Head of Open Finance and Developer Experience at Mastercard. Jess, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here today.
Let's jump in. When the average person thinks about Mastercard, or for that matter, some of your competitors, the first thing that comes to mind is paying for stuff. usually with a card. After all, it's right there in the name. To make that payment work, companies like Mastercard have built vast payment networks. But those networks are actually about a lot more than just payments. So why don't we start there? How is running a payments network about more than just processing payments?
Running a payments network is really about connecting people, businesses to something they want or need. The payment is a component of that that's needed to complete the transaction, the exchange. But when you're in a payments network, you have to think about making the payment, but also the security, the trust, and the experience that sits within that. When you think about that, there's a lot of data involved in doing that. And what happens is you have different data elements or attributes that allow different components of that flow. And so when you're thinking about, hey, I'm running a payments network, but it's so much more than payments. It's about what are all the services and all the needs that you have to fulfill from the start of the journey to the end. When you're doing that for the payment, you find these services and you find these data attributes that can do so much more than just payments. And that's a major example of what open finance can do. And so, yes, can it help facilitate payment initiation? Absolutely. But its reach is so much grander and broader than that it's just one small component.
These payment networks were first introduced in the 1950s and 60s. But if you fast forward to the 2010s, you said the magic word, open finance, open banking. This new idea comes along. In Europe, where open banking was first introduced, it was positioned not only as a new kind of payment network, but a new way to share personal financial data, bring that added value that you're describing, but all based on open standards. When did it first become clear to you that this was more than just another payment network, just another data sharing network? This was a fundamentally new way to approach data sharing.
I'll have to tell you, I think for me personally, understanding the power of data started very early in my career, well before anyone was talking about open banking. And what I realized really early is that when you can leverage data, unstructured data, to have some type of insight for anything, you can really innovate and you can move things forward in a very different and unique way. If we think about Europe, where open banking was born, and it was this idea of open standard, what it was really about was allowing for innovation. It was the idea of, hey, there's this data that if it's unlocked, can create real solutions and innovation for our consumers and small businesses that may be harder to do today without access to it. I've always loved data. It is my true love. But I think knowing that if you can take unstructured data and have more access to that data, the innovation opportunities and the acceleration is meaningful. The one thing I'll add on to that is when open banking started in Europe with these open standards, really regulation led. The other big learning the world had was standards are important. There's debates on regulation. Does it help or it doesn't? I won't comment on that. But here's what does help. Solving real problems commercializes things. And that's really what this should be about. And it's one of the few revolutions that all boats rise, both in the business world and everyone touching it. And so that's the message that I spend a lot of my time trying to get out to everyone. There is so much unstructured data, open banking, open finance being a major area there, that if we can really use that, like harness the power of that, it's unstoppable.
That's interesting. You don't necessarily look at open finance, open banking as fundamentally new, but a continuation of unlocking the power of data that existed before. Is that right?
I think that's right. I think the premise is about how do you unlock the power of data? How do you get access in a safe, secure, and trusted way? And that is a big difference, right, with open banking and open finance, depending on how you define that. The idea of having mutual agreement, we say consent in the industry, which I know you know, but having a mutual agreement between the person who owns the data, the consumer or the small business or the business, and who they want to send it to and their responsibility is like a big component of unlocking that data, which is not the case for all data. And so I think knowing if you can manage trust and you can have people realize they have access to this data, this currency, that they can use to better their life is really where the real innovation comes. And I don't think that's new. The consent and the open standards, that is new. But unlocking the power of data, I think, is not.
We'll come back to these concepts like consent and trust. Certainly they are crucial to making this all work. But let's talk first about what Mastercard has done to embrace this idea. First, doesn't this whole notion of a new kind of network based on open standards put companies like Mastercard in a bit of an unusual position, needing to support your existing networks while also moving to embrace this new kind of network based on open standards? How do you balance the old and the new as you argue that this is in fact a continuum?
Yeah, it's a really powerful question. I believe Mastercard's been in the payments world, as you said earlier, for a very long time, ubiquitous, trusted payments around the world. And we do that remarkably well. We've created lots of services that have helped with fraud, risk, underwriting, and other components of our business. Loyalty, I could go on and on. I won't. I know we don't have forever. And although the way and the architecture is very different, the premise of being at the core of the trust and being able to facilitate exchanges of information in a ubiquitous way with trust is at the cornerstone of what we know how to do. And so this is an extension of that. And this data is used with consent to help make the core payment network better. And that's what it's about. How are you having compounding innovation, adding on to what you have in a way that you can keep compounding the innovation for the ecosystem and our partners, right? We sit between so many players. I joke all the time, everyone's our customer. But that does require compounding innovation. And I think that is having this other open standards business connected to a true network coming together enables that type of compounding innovation.
So by compounding, you mean exponentially driving additional value from your existing network by adding these new capabilities?
I think that's right. I think it goes both ways. An example, it's a tactical example, and there's so many more that's just about the data attribute, but I can tell you from cocktail parties, people aren't excited into hearing about all the different data features that connect. But an example of us using open banking to make our network better is if you have a Mastercard debit card, we put in account opening, leveraging a bank account for funding and for identity as part of the core product. That's an example of being able to interconnect and getting exponential value.
Case in point, in recent years, Mastercard has invested heavily in open banking capabilities. You've spent over $1 billion acquiring Finicity and Eyal, gaining connectivity to 95% of U.S. deposit accounts and over 3,000 European banks. Walk us through the strategic logic here. Why those investments? Is this putting your money where your mouth is, creating this compounding value?
I think so, absolutely. And I'll say, we have remarkable reach in Europe and in the US. We also are in Australia. And we have partnerships in other parts of LAC, which we can talk about a little bit later. We believe in the power of data. We believe people own their data. And we believe there's services and value that can sit on top of that for material impact. So we are putting our money where our mouth is, but we've made acquisitions, but we've also put a ton of investment into having an enterprise-grade global platform that meets the standard of a payments company with ubiquity around the world that's unmatched. Because we believe, completely believe, that this unstructured data can help in so many different ways. One is, it is another payment option, and we believe in choice. We've been like that since the beginning of time. The other is, the most powerful one, is using it to help our partners and others underwrite, provide better credit, not just at the beginning, but through the journey of the ecosystem. Another is helping with identity and fraud and reducing scams. And that's really powerful. And the one area, it's not a product, but it's a segment, is small business. No matter what country in the world you go to, small business is a segment that always needs help. And this business can help it in a material way. Strategically for us, I think we have the opportunity to leverage the power of a global platform, but also be very deep in the nuances of the local market. In Europe, every country is different. Every single country. And I have to tell you, for this show, the Money 2020 show, there's people from all over the world here. And it's amazing to hear them cross-share about the differences, but also needing the enterprise global power to move it forward.
Mastercard is, of course, a global organization with global reach. But open banking maturity varies dramatically from one region to another. The UK and EU are well ahead of the US. Latin America and Asia are developing their own unique approaches. How does Mastercard create a globally scalable open banking business when every region has different regulations, technical standards, and market structures?
Yeah, it's a great question. And this isn't going to be exciting, but having the right technical infrastructure and policies, protocols, and compliance, critical. We invested in that early to be best in class because we knew that there would be growth. We knew there would be localization that not only is local, but will change. The world's a very different place, right? If we think about it, years ago, regulation may not change for 10 or 20 years in certain countries. That's not the case anymore. It could change very quickly. Australia is a market that regulation changes a lot more frequently. And you have to have the right infrastructure and policies in place to be nimble and make change. That was one. That was a big component of what we're doing. The other is people. We make sure we have people in every country we're in, even if that's not where the global platform's built. You know, we're licensed and regulated in every market. And we have people in every country in Europe, no matter how big or small, where we have connectivity, we have a few people there to make sure that we have it right. Because that's the kind of business it is. If you're not doing that, this can become, in your business, something that has, little issues here and there because the detail matters. And so combining those two things is how you really, really win. And I'd be remiss to say it. We've gotten this far, and I haven't said anything about AI, but
we'll get there.
Oh, I'm sure. But also constantly refreshing. What are we doing with automation, machine learning, and AI to make sure all of the stuff that can be standardized is a major component of that.
Let's talk about some of the new capabilities that you've introduced. Mastercard now offers account owner verification, payment success indicators, verification of income, deposit switch, and bill pay switch, all layered on top of open banking infrastructure. This starts to look less like a payments network and more like a generalized financial data utility. Is that the direction? And if so, why?
So Mastercard in general has a very large services organization. We have a massive fraud and risk business that powers many things that sit outside of even the payment network. So I say that because I believe this business is very similar to that. We do things that are helping what people may know Mastercard about, but it does so much more and should. And it's about taking something, whether it's an open standard or not yet, whether it's regulated or not, and saying, what are all of the services and innovation that we can sit on top of it to help reduce the things that matter to us? Fraud, risk, security, better conversion, better experiences, in a way with trust. And so, yes, we will continue to invest in our services business at Mastercard. It's a major part of our business strategy, but it also is something that's feeding the needs of our customers. The world is moving so quickly in certain areas and so slowly in others. And so how we go after building these products like account owner verification, that's important. And we're able to do that in a way that's unique to everyone else because of all the access to data we have. That's really important. It helps with security. Super exciting is income verification. Not everybody has the same job. Not everyone's working 9 to 5. 1 in 5 Americans is credit invisible. It's not that they're not creditworthy, they're credit invisible. And being able to look and say, actually, this person has a good income. It's just not a traditional income stream. And offering that up is really, really important. And so I bring up those two solutions because one's safety, one's about underwriting, And then you talked about bill pay switch. One's just convenience. You want to switch your bank or you want to pay differently, you might not do it unless it was convenient. So you get all the way from maybe helping someone who has no inclusion in their lives to making something easier that, you want to change your subscription payment. And that's how big it is. And so we're going to sit in that environment and keep innovating.
There's something else that makes Mastercard unique, and that's your approach to fintech partnerships. In 2014, Mastercard introduced StartPath, an incubator program to support fintech startups globally. Since then, you've signed up over 500 startups from over 60 countries. In 2022, under your leadership, a dedicated open banking track was introduced to the program. What is the goal of this program, and how does it benefit Mastercard?
The goal of the program has changed over the beginning of the time when we started it in 2014. It feels so long ago, actually, saying that out loud. We moved into the tracks because we realized that getting like-minded fintechs at a certain stage in their career together not only helps us have a better understanding about what's happening in the ecosystem and allows us to help scale and innovate and help them, they also help each other. Because in the program, in the tracks, which you likely know, we try very hard to get a bunch of fintechs that are complementary to each other, trying to solve the same purpose, right? And that's how you get to real innovation. I have been such an advocate of it because it has not only advanced my business by working with a lot of these StartPath participants because they're in markets we're not in yet. We're able to do and test new things. They teach us, we teach them. It gives us an opportunity to really raise the bar for everyone and find different levels of experience. And that's what it's been about. The whole purpose of what we do today is we want to find fintechs that we can help support, that support some of our strategic goals, product lines, and businesses for our customers. And so that we can work with them first in product development, bring them first to our customers, sometimes provide really strong feedback on things that we say, hey, we have experience here, maybe try this. But it is to help innovate faster. And that's why we've done the tracks. We have other tracks as well, because it provides focus, like real focus versus just being open. And being open is fine. But for what we're trying to accomplish sometimes, this really focused look allows us to help fintechs commercialize faster, and it helps us to use them for more product development more quickly.
Many of the folks that you're courting at these fintechs are, in fact, developers. Many people on the show floor here are developers. Your title includes not only the term open finance, but developer experience as well. What is the importance of developer experience in building out these kinds of relationships? Does it relate to the idea of APIs as products?
The developer experience is so important. I could spend 5 hours talking about it. The developer experience team at Mastercard, which is a different team than my open finance team, is so important to the open finance success. I can't even put it into words. But I do believe this. At Mastercard, we talk a lot about API greatness. We have something called the gold standard. We look at the APIs and we score them every year and we change the bar. And we say if your API is not good enough, you can't be on our developer site with our product community because we have to own it together. We've watched the maturity of Mastercard come up unbelievably over the last decade from, a while ago, just in thinking about integration. It is so important when products are built that the developer and their experience all the way through is at the initial thinking of the innovation and the story constructs. And that's a shared responsibility between good product and engineering owners. And we work diligently for that. It was important before, having the right APIs, making sure that the architecture of those APIs are done right and for purpose so they can work with our external partners and they're easy to implement. Critical. It's only going to be more important in the world of agentic AI. It is so critical. And so we spend a lot of time on making sure every product we have is fit for purpose, working often with our StartPath customers and partners to say, hey, what's working, what isn't? And I can tell you, we get really good feedback from developers. They don't hold back. They're going to tell you what's good and what's not.
Developers certainly do speak their mind, in my experience. If you don't mind, at this point, I'd like to quote you. Quote, Transparency is the key ingredient to instilling trust in the digital economy. When individuals and small businesses have agency over their financial data, who has it, where it's going, and how it's being used, they can make informed decisions, access better opportunities, and have more confidence that their financial data is just that, theirs. End quote. What role do you see the payments networks playing in instilling this trust?
I'm going to answer the question less about a payment network and more just about somebody who's in this space, if that's okay with you. I believe the only way you're ever going to scale what all of this data that's available can do for the ecosystem is if consumers, small businesses trust you. They trust that the data is being used for the purposes intended. The data is going to be protected, secure, unhackable. That if they want to retract the use of that data, they can. And without the transparency, without the innovation of this transparency in a way that doesn't have a ton of friction, it will be very hard for us ever to realize what this can really be. And I do believe everybody has so much unstructured data that they may or may not realize in just the open finance world, that if it can be harnessed, it will make their life so much better. But nobody is going to give anyone access to that if there is not real trust. And with trust comes transparency and responsibility. It is critical that everything we do is safe, secure, and that there's redundancies put in place. And so that's where I think our role and responsibility is. And without that, you're going to lose the trust of people. You have to be transparent.
As you said earlier, network providers like Mastercard have always acted as a kind of trust broker, setting rules, enforcing standards, verifying identities, and mediating disputes between issuing banks, acquiring banks, merchants. Now, with open banking, it seems you're continuing to position Mastercard as a kind of trust layer for data that flows between all these entities, banks, fintechs, and third parties. How does the trust model in open banking differ from the trust model that Mastercard has been operating for 6 decades?
I don't know if it really does, but I think the idea of trust is only going to be more and more important. People want to trust who's touching any type of financial account they have, right? That's important. You really can't be empowered unless you're financially independent in some way. And I think people know that even subconsciously. And I think that's why trust is so important for payments or financial decisions. If we think about open banking, open data, and this idea of what we can do to help people feel comfortable that we can sit in the middle with trust, is again, it's transparency and security in what we're doing. It's also making it clear that with their consent, they can have hyper-personalization in a way they haven't ever been able to have before because they have such great trust. They know it, it works, they feel good about it, they can understand it, and they have recourse if they want to take access back. Again, like I said before, there is such a responsibility by a payment network on the payment flows. This is people's money or a company's money. It's a big deal, right? That's why you have to make sure you get the right disputes. Merchants need to be treated fairly. Issuers need to be treated fairly, all for the betterment of the consumer. This data exchange isn't different. It's the same idea. And the trust layer, I love it. I don't know if you've trademarked that, but it is this great idea around if you have this secure data exchange, right, between two parties, even commercially, whoever it may be, a bank to a merchant, a bank to a bank, and you have rules and policies, and you're taking the responsibility to say, hey, you guys know how to work together, and we feel good about it. And because of that, now the customer can trust you. That's exactly the kind of roles we should be playing.
I promised we would come back to AI. So here we are. Certainly, it's on the minds of many people here at Money 2020. It's almost literally every second booth. And the role of AI in financial services is exactly the question all these people are asking. Specifically, the concept of agentic banking and agentic commerce is attracting a lot of attention. As Mastercard evolves its role as a trust broker, how does AI impact that evolution?
It's funny, I actually think open banking accidentally is going to be the cornerstone of agentic AI. Because if we think about what it is, right, if we just break it down, the most powerful agents are going to be the ones that know the most about how to make the right decision for you, ultimately, over time, right? I think lots of debate on how far we are not from autonomous agents. Regardless, the only way you're going to be able to have these agents do that for you is with consent and trust. There is no other way. And whether that's for open finance or other things, the only business that has consent built out, understood, and scaled like we need done is in this world. And so it's been really, really enjoyable for me to watch us be able to bring everything we've learned on the consent portion of open banking, open finance, and move it into the developer experience team for being able to leverage consent for our agentic AI toolkit and also for things like Agent Pay. And I think the impact that it has on agentic AI is profound. And then the security and the safety and the components of it. What I will say is, and I share this a lot with our customers, and it seems like a little bit like a scare tactic, which is not my intent, but for customers to find the right financial products, today they could go a lot of different ways. Google search is a big one, right? People use it or some search. You're going to get to a place where your agent's going to give you a first and final. You have to be discoverable, and you have to be able to have the right products for the segment. And consumers and small businesses and others are going to have very strong consent metrics with this agent to be able to get the data from the agent to be able to tell you what your first and final is. Super important to start preparing for it now, which brings me back to why having the right API constructs is a foundation. You know, you said to me, is APIs, is like API like the product? It's actually the foundation for everything. Your product strategy, your go-to-market. And so we spend a lot of time on that. Sorry if I was a little long-winded. I'm very excited about it.
Not at all. I'm, as you might imagine, excited about it as well. Certainly, it seems as if AI and agentic AI have provided the ultimate answer to the question, what is your open banking use case? You almost don't have to answer anymore. The answer is agentic AI. This notion of consent as it relates to agents is a fascinating one. Can you speak a little more to how Mastercard intends to help customers handle their consents across multiple platforms, whether for themselves or for their agents?
Sure. You know, I think there's a couple different ways, and it definitely, the way you said that, for themselves or for their agents, and actually the use case across these different platforms will matter. There's a lot of complexity in that. I won't pretend to have consent figured out for the entire agentic AI ecosystem. Nobody does. What I will tell you we can do is we know how to do consent for specific use cases in a way that makes sense in today's everyday with open finance. We have insight tokens and other forms of consent for the agentic side of our business to help make sure we're transferring data. And we have registrations for agents and other components. And we have an agent toolkit, which I touched on briefly before, where we're using an MCP to go through and make sure that all our APIs, including how we manage consent, is available for our partners and external agents to access all of it so that they can use it. There will be more for us to do. But in markets where consent is regulated, or we know consent is needed, whether it be for an open banking regulation or GDPR, that we have a full end-to-end product where we can do that for you. And we'll continue to develop that. Other areas where we think consent is a big part of hyper-personalization and having the right safety and security, we've created the right access and tools to have it be leveraged so that we can continue to extend innovation. I am excited to see how this trust in the ecosystem scales. And we do that, and we work with other partners. We work with everyone. And I say that because it's important. You can't do these things with consent if you're not working with all of the parties that people are going to, whether that's an AI company, a digital player, partner, a bank, a merchant, it doesn't matter. When you're creating these things, especially in the world of consent, you have to work with everyone on the co-creation and development of what that product really looks like.
There's other places that these parties may appear. In many places, consent-driven data sharing based on open standards has started to spread beyond banking to other sectors of the economy, like healthcare, telecom, and energy, evolving from open banking into open finance and then into open data. Does Mastercard have a role to play in empowering data sharing and instilling trust in data sharing across sectors beyond finance?
I think it's a long journey. I think the open finance sector is still really maturing. You mentioned it earlier when you said it's in a lot of markets, but it's at very different levels of maturity, which is very true. And I think we're going to continue to stay focused on the trade streams and the industries that add the most value, on how we want to offer access and this trust layer of consent for use of the data. And it will depend on the use case. I think we will expand into the use cases that make sense when the data is ready and it makes sense and it's solving real problems. We've already started to. We do a ton on the mortgage reports space in the US, which I'm going to tell you, no one in a cocktail party is like super excited about a digital mortgage report. But to be very candid, it has a material impact on the US and how mortgages are approved, the expense, and the ease of mind. And so that's one example of something that's a little outside of the ecosystem we talked about. Big part of our business, we do it, we've been doing it forever. Finicity did it before the acquisition. But we are looking at other trade streams already. We have been for a long time. We didn't talk a lot about crypto, but that's a real trade stream. And being able to leverage those insights of that data and combine it with other components of data, really important. And then we use attributes of other data platforms with consent that maybe we don't have all of the data because we don't need it. But we have small components, data features that we can interconnect with what we have and provides a better result, whether it be to fight fraud or identity or just give you better information on your financial health. And so we'll keep doing that. We will keep expanding into trade streams. Open data is a big word. And so I think we'll go into the places that make sense and where we think we can add a lot of value as the market matures and the data is ready.
Let's close with a look to the future. 10 years from now, when open banking, open finance, even open data are a lot more baked than they are today, what do you want people to say Mastercard did for the relationship between consumers, their data, and their money?
What gets me up every day, and I talk to my team about this, is being able to work on something where you have a remarkable platform and you can see and harness the power of data to help your business thrive, help all of your customers and partners thrive, and do that for the betterment of a user, a consumer, or small business, and more will come from it. I talked about compound innovation. 90% of data is unstructured today. Based on studies, less than half is being used in any way. I'm going to tell you, less than half feels real generous because I think it's a really small portion. If we can figure out how to use that unstructured data and do it in a way with all of the trust, safety, security, and technical infrastructure and the local nuances, I believe you can change the world. You can have better inclusion, you can have better products and innovation, there just will be more. And so that's what I hope. I hope people talk about Mastercard being one of the thought leaders in that space to move this industry forward for the world.
Jess, thank you for a fascinating conversation. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Credit cards and the networks that power them have been a cornerstone of the global financial system for decades, providing millions with easier ways to borrow and easier ways to pay. But the bigger story, often untold, is the infrastructure underneath them. The part most people never see, but everyone increasingly depends on. Once money becomes digital, making the payment is the easy part. Much harder is the question of how the data behind that payment is handled. Who can see it, who can use it, and who gets to decide. Enter open banking. More than just a technical shift, it is a shift in power, letting the customer decide how their data is used, by whom, and for what purpose. With open banking, innovation does not demand giving up control or giving up trust. To Jess, while open banking is a continuation of the tradition to make better use of data, it adds two new elements: consent and open standards. Consent ensures the consumer is always in charge of how their data is used and shared. Open standards ensure that the whole model can scale, so that banks, fintechs, payment networks, and governments all speak the same language. Together, they create the foundation of a trust layer. This layer is crucial. After all, data can only create value when people have trust in the system. In the age of AI, this trust becomes more important than ever. For agentic finance to reach its true potential, it requires access to personal data and consent to transact. Without trust, such permission will not be granted, and AI will become a liability rather than a revolution. These goals, open standards, strong consent, and a trusted ecosystem, have been at the heart of open banking since the beginning. But truth be told, card networks like Mastercard have been trying to reach them for much longer. Put open banking and the card networks together, and you get a financial system that is connected while being transparent, innovative while being safe, and more useful for everyone than ever before.
Thanks for listening to Mr. Open Banking, the podcast that explores the ongoing evolution of open banking and its impact on our lives. Make no mistake, the rise of open banking is going to change financial services forever, and we will be covering that story every step of the way. This is your host, Eyal and Jess. Until next time.
This episode of Mr. Open Banking was made possible by F-Data, the Financial Data and Technology Association, advocating for open finance across North America and around the world. To learn more, join F-Data's Global Open Finance Summit and visit fdata.global.